A descendant of boxing royalty. From the golden age of heavyweights, our guest this week has his own professional record of 16-0 with 15 wins by knockout. Today his business teaches instructors and clients that the fight doesn't start until you want to quit. He inspires everyone to stop doubting themselves and be the champion they were born to be. It's a mindset that brought his business a $4 million investment and a rapid growth that's still increasing. Please join me in welcoming founder of Everybody Fights, George Foreman III, to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Welcome, George.
Thank you. Glad
Was I correct with that intro?
I'll take it, man. You made me sound a lot better than I am, but I appreciate that.
So, is it right they call you the monk? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so it's funny. So my dad was a fighter and was in the Olympics in 1968. It's funny. This is how important the name is. And he won his gold medal, and he came back into his neighborhood, and he was known around the neighborhood as he was a thug.
Right.
They called him Monkey, but no one knew his real name. And so he said that was his name growing up. Everybody called him Monkey. And so he even told I think it was the Houston Chronicle, must have been, he said, make sure to put George Monkey Foreman, because otherwise I won't be a celebrity when I get home. And that was his name. And so I was his second boy, and he gave me his nickname Monkey. And my aunt said, who probably gave him the name Monkey, now that I think about it, said we can't have two monkeys in one household. So he's going to be Monk, you're going to be Monkey, and it stuck. And then as I got older, my dad started calling me the Monk, and for whatever reason. So that's the story of the name. So
you got quite a few brothers and a sister, is that right?
Yeah, there's 10 of us. 10?
Yeah. And quite a few of you are called George as well?
Yeah, 8 of us if you include my nephews now.
Right.
But there's my dad and then 5 brothers. These 5 sons were all named George.
Right.
1 through 6.
So what's it like kind of at home where it's like, George, come here, you know?
It's so funny. It's none of us go by George in the household except my oldest brother, whose nickname is Little George. And so there's George, Little George, Monk, Big Will, Red, and then Joe, my last brother. And then the only time we go by our full name is sometime in school. Even in school, they typically call us by our nicknames.
Really?
Yep. And then at the airport, when we're all traveling together, someone yells George, and we literally all turn around. So that's always goofy, but.
So take us back a bit, because I guess you probably had a very interesting childhood with with your father, I guess, and his his history. What was it like as a kid growing up around that type of, I guess, craziness for the average person?
It's funny, man, like being 6 years old and someone saying, hey, your dad's on TV. And you didn't know, like, your dad was even, like, capable or able to be on TV. Like, he didn't tell you. Someone else said, your dad's on TV. And you're like, what? My dad's on TV? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I know him. My dad. He's on the same TV I watch cartoons on. Like, that, I remember, I'll never forget it. That was weird. But other than that, man, like, seeing him in a newspaper, he made it seem very normal. Like when he came home, didn't talk about his career much, ever. And when he was with us, he was totally focused on us, over-focused, like, leave me alone, Dad. And I think it was a lot more normal than most people might think. When we would travel, that wasn't normal, and people stopping him in the airport and couldn't go to a grocery store. That wasn't, easy, stuff like that. But we didn't really care, So I don't know. Like I said, I think a lot more normal than people think. And no matter what, he made sure we were in church 3 or 4 times a week if he could. He's a preacher.
Right.
That never stopped. We had our youth center that we all worked at. It was a nonprofit. That never stopped. And then he would just leave for a few days and come back home. And even when he'd fight, we weren't allowed to be at the fight, but we'd watch it on TV. He'd leave on like maybe Tuesday, stay in the city for a few days, get acclimated, he'd fight, and then he was back in church on Sunday morning. And if he didn't get beat up too much, he'd preach. So pretty regular.
And I read the story about him becoming a preacher, and that moment. Did that happen before you were born, or did that?
Yeah, so I believe he had a fight. It's about 1976, 77.
Right.
He just woke up one day and, him and Muhammad Ali would have been the most recognizable athletes in the world, because basketball and football wasn't that big yet globally. Yeah. And he just said, you know what, that's it. I quit. I'm not going to box anymore. And he shaved his head and started preaching on the street corner. And so just to give you an analogy, the more I understand, it would have been like, LeBron James waking up and saying, you know what, I'm going to go preach on the street corner over there. And you could just walk right up to him and talk to him. And everybody thought he was absolutely nuts. And because he probably was at the time. And 5 years later, I was born. Yeah, about 5 or 6 years later. And so the guy I grew up knowing was just a preacher. He was 300 pounds. He liked playing with horses and cows. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, he's a big celebrity again. So.
Right. And so what were some of the lessons that you got from your father? Because I was reading an interesting story. It sounded a little bit like Rocky, where, he was kind of putting you in small shoes and getting you to pull cars and all kind of crazy stuff. Tell us that story, because I think it's pretty interesting, and it sounds like it probably wasn't that easy, being a kid with someone like that sort of pushing you. Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
I think, preparing for the impossible, believing in the impossible, running towards the impossible, and just like enjoying it. I think that's what I get from my dad. And like, I remember one time, he's a minister, a preacher, and the guy who plays the guitar in the church just decided he was done. He left. And so my dad can't play the guitar at all. He really can't play it still to this day, but he was like, all right, he got his guitar and he was thumbing 2 strings and singing in front of 100 people at church. And I was like, this is the most embarrassing thing. And he wasn't embarrassed, That's my dad, and to see him go into things like being, cookbooks, the youth center, preacher, boxer, speaker, and so on and so forth, selling consumer products, all this stuff, and have no experience, and be okay looking like an idiot until he's considered the expert. That's him. And so I think what he instilled in me is knowing that the only way you can do that is having tough skin, not caring about what people say, embracing it, learning to be empowered by what people say, and slay he always says, slay the beast, You got to slay Goliath to make people a believer. If you're not willing to do that, then just go do something normal, How do we do that? You make sure that nothing can push you as hard as you're willing to push yourself. So in the training you saw, and what people don't know is, he'd have me pulling this ATV, killing myself to move it an inch in the mud, and he's screaming in my ear, nobody ever gave you anything, and you didn't have it easy, because financially I did have it easy, but that wasn't easy. And I remember one time I was running, and I'd run about 7 miles, and I was chasing one of my sparring partners who was lighter than me, and I'd put too much clothing on. It was cold, but I had like ski pants on. And I overheated, and I didn't know it. I didn't realize what was going on. I thought I was just getting tired. And then I was just about to beat him for the run. It was a hill, and I'm not fast, but I was like, he can't beat me. It's just not gonna happen. So, and I just passed him, and as soon as I crossed the line that was the finish line, I went like this, and I passed out in midair, and then I hit the ground so hard I woke up, and he saw it all. And we didn't talk about it until years later. He admitted he noticed that, and I looked up, and he goes, he's like, good job. I was like, all right. He's like, you okay? I said, yeah. He said, all right. And so I went back to my apartment, not my apartment, my cabin. It was on the ranch. And I thought I was going to die. I was like, I'm going to die. So I went into the shower, and then the water hit me, and then I just laid down in the shower, and I was like, this is it, man. And I didn't have enough energy to get my phone. And then he sent in my cousin, knocked on the door, came in, crawled, got me out of there. They took me to get shots, B12, and fluids, and IV, and all that. And still didn't talk about it. He said, you want to go to the doctor? I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, let's go. And he's like, all right, you want to go to IHOP? Yeah. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. That's my dad, But thank God, because there's nothing I'm afraid of. There's just nothing I'm afraid of. So that's what he passed on.
And he in that situation, he was purposely not coming up to you to sort of, he sent someone else in to make sure it was okay, as opposed to him doing it.
Yeah, he said, hey, we're going to IHOP. Hey, come on, we got to go to IHOP. And then once I got in the car, he was like, let's go to the doctor. I was like, all right. No complaining, no expressing that I passed out, no talking about the water hitting me and that I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
Let's just run to the doctor real quick, take a few shots, and let's go to IHOP.
Right.
So I don't know how to articulate what that meant, but he tried to pass that on to me because that's what he needed,
Right. And there's a story about pulling the truck as well and getting your nose in the dirt. Because I think that story and that moment of the sort of decision in that moment is pretty relevant to what you're doing now. Would you mind just sharing that
story?
That story, yeah.
Yeah, so my dad, I was managing my dad for, about 4 years at the time. Started in college, was always on a plane. I don't know how I graduated from school. Transferred from Pepperdine University to Rice. And that was my world. I was going to be a businessman, and if I ever left my dad, I was going to be a stockbroker. That was my plan, always in a suit. And, compared to everybody else in the world, I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, I'm okay admitting that. And so, anyway, I told my dad I wanted to box to lose weight. He was like, that's cool. And he's like, make sure to, whatever. He had actually closed down the boxing component of our gym, the portion, because of unsupervised sparring. So I did train for a year by myself, lost 70 pounds. Really, my brothers had dared me to have an amateur fight. And that was like my motivation to lose the weight. Lost the weight, and then was going to have my first amateur fight. And my dad was like, wait. You're really going to do this, We were actually in Orange County at the time we had the conversation. We were visiting the Crystal Cathedral, I think, his old friend. And he's like, nah, like, hold back, let me, if you're going to do it, let me advise you, and let's get, And I couldn't find amateurs to fight me, because he was like, let me make sure you're not going to fight someone that has more fights than you. You should be zero fights. No one who had 0 fights was willing to fight me in the city of Houston. So then he's like, why don't we just have an pro fight? And he's like, you can do this and that, and the guy's gonna show up. So I said, okay. We'll have a pro fight. And he said, well, let me train you. I said, okay. He said, 6-week training camp. Then you're gonna have your first professional fight. That turned into a year. And somewhere along the way, I don't know. But anyway, the first thing he said, I'm skipping a step. He said, all right, I think I should train you. I said, okay. He said, all right, the first thing you have to do before we start training to learn any boxing is you have to run 10 miles in military boots. I was like, cool. So we're still traveling, and I would just sit on the recumbent bike a little bit. I'd do the stair climber. I've been boxing at home, but never running more than like 3 miles. Every week, did you run your miles? No. Did you run your miles? No. Did you run your miles? And he's like, man, I'm not touching you until you run your 10 miles, So So anyway, we're driving back. There was a big hurricane in Houston, so we flew into Dallas, checked into a hotel for a few days, and I still didn't do it. And so finally, we got in the car and we drove to the ranch to avoid the hurricane, and we stopped at Famous Footwear. He got me a pair. He said he walked in. He didn't tell me what he was doing. And he walked in and got a pair of boots that were a full size smaller than what I wear. And he brought them in. He was like, we're going to do our run today. And I was like, I just wish I'd done them.
Did he buy them smaller on purpose, or did he not know?
I don't know, but we shared shoes. He knew what size I was, So, so anyway, we get to the ranch and he's like, yeah, go stretch and I'll see you outside. And when we come out to the road, and he has this little kind of like a mini truck, and he's like, let's go. And so I started jogging, and he never let me I had to jog or run the entire time for 10 miles. And so don't know how I do it. I couldn't do it to this day. I don't know how I did it that day. And I had literally blood seeping out the back of the boots, and still have the scars on my heels to this day for that. No, and I tried to hide the fact that it hurt, because I knew if I showed him that it hurt, he'd find a way to work me harder. So I'd like walk and act like my feet didn't hurt, and then go in my room and be like. Then the next thing he said, all right, go rest. And about 10 days later, we met at the track, and he's like, I want you to pull this thing. And normally I'd see him pull stuff on the road. He was like, no, we're going to pull on the dirt. And I pulled. It was wet. It was a horse track. We trained standardbred horses. I'm pulling, I'm leaning and straining, and that's how you get a hernia, So I'm like, where is this going? Because the thing's not moving, and he's sitting in it. And I'm pulling. And then finally I was just like, all right, well, maybe if I crawl. I'm crawling. And then I just tried to fully leverage my body, and I just dumped myself. But right before that, that's when he was screaming at me. He was like, nobody gave you anything. You did, and he's come in my ear, and I'm like, Dad, like, I'm cool, like I'm working, But I think it was very important for him to know that this wasn't going to come easy to me.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to let it come easy to me, Number one. And number two, I'm pulling, it's not moving. He's screaming at me, and I'm like, this is totally impossible. And then I just dumped my head, boom, because I got all my weight forward, and I drove, and it moved like a couple inches. And then he was like, that's enough, because he knew I was going to get injured, I think, too. And I'm like, what? And he's like, that's all I needed to see. And I think And what he told me is that I needed to know that he's like, that's what it's going to take, because no matter what I teach you, you're going to get in the ring and someone's going to dump you. Dump you means you knock you down, you know? Someone's going to crack you really hard. And I need to know you have it in you to flip a switch and just push past what seems logical or reasonable. And he's like, that's what you did.
Yeah.
And he's like, once I saw that and I knew you did the 10 miles, then I said, I can teach him to box, but I can't teach him that.
Right.
And I
Which
think
heart, I guess, I suppose, isn't it?
and if I had complained, knowing my father and knowing myself, he would have never trained me, because you can't save. It's a life or death sport, you know, and that's what saves you.
Right.
That flipping that switch, and I'm not boasting. I just know that's the case, and I knew he knew, like, without that, there's nothing he could do. So that's the story.
Yeah. And that did happen. You did get knocked down, and is that right? And you did have to make that decision.
Yeah. Crazy story, man. So do you want to hear it?
Yeah, let's tell us.
So that right after the whole incident on the horse track, after that I was able to pull the cars on the street, because once you get it moving, you know. And he started training me, teaching me how to jab, throw the right hand, you know, etc. So cut to, man, I had maybe 10 or 12 fights. I'd say 7 of those were just guys that, like, there's just no way I could lose, you know. It was more about getting me comfortable in front of big crowds, training for the fight, the pressure, doing interviews, getting comfortable going in and not losing all my energy and my focus in that. And then I started to fight harder guys here and there. And so my dad, I had this training camp, and I remember he was like, every day was a murder session in the gym, to the point I'm like, I'm overtraining. Like, this isn't cool. So there was a lot of tension between us. And I never taught back, but there's a lot of tension. And I get a call from the promoter, who, and I'll tell you a funny story, but after, the promoter calls me and he said, hey, Monk, he said, I know you're stressed out about this fight, and I see what your dad's doing and all that, but don't worry about this guy. He said, you fought him before in the gym, sparred him? And I was like, I don't remember that. And he's like, yeah, he looks like this. And I'm like, I just don't remember that. And he said, he's heavy like me. These are his words. He's fat like me. He can't fight like me. You're going to be fine. You're just making an appearance, or something like that. So I show up to the fight about a week later, and just remember, like, then I go back to the gym and my dad's killing me, and I'm like, what in the world is going on here if I'm not fighting anybody and he's treating me like this, you know? Over and over and over, do this, do that, drilling over and over and over. I could smell blood in my nose, you know, like every day. We get there and to the weigh-in, and I take off my shirt, do my weight, you know, do my pictures, and then I'm looking for the guy, like, where is this portly, roly-poly guy that told me I was fighting, right? And I don't see him, and then up steps this guy onto the platform named Eric Lindsay. I hope he sees this. And he's got boom, boom, muscle, you know, like when you see guys have muscles in their neck, you know, like, you know, you know what they're doing. So they're you know, training or whatever. And I look at the promoter, and he looks at me and he looks away. And so he asked me after the weigh-in, he said, what do you think? And I was like, man, what do you think? And so I was so nervous in that fight, because I just mentally wasn't prepared for that.
No.
I was walking up the stairs. I remember walking up the stairs to get into the arena, coming off the bus. We had a bus that I took to all my fights. And I was like, maybe I'll trip. And maybe if I trip, you know?
Really? That was what you was thinking,
I was
just to
like, man,
get out of
this
this.
is not what I, you know?
No.
But I was like, nah, I'm going here, man. Just like that pulling that thing, you know? It's just like, man, I don't want to do this, and it seems impossible, but.
Were you like, I know it's a bit of a stupid question, but were you scared?
That's my point. I was scared.
Right.
But I wasn't so scared that I wouldn't do it, you know?
Okay.
So I was like, man, all right, let's do it, you know? And that was, it was important that I had that. And so anyway, I get in the ring, and I guess my point is I'm not afraid of it. I am afraid of a lot, but I'm not afraid to do it anyway. If that makes sense? Yeah. Don't let it paralyze you. So I got into the ring, I'm bouncing around, the guy's like shaking loose, and I'm like, here we go. And he played a trick on me. Get in there, something I teach my amateur fighters. And I stepped in with a jab, and as I was moving in, he hit me with the right hand. And apparently, I looked at the tape, I was still up, and I was dazed, and then he hit me with a left hook. Boom! Then I hit it. Bow! Hit the ground. And so, get up, and I was so out of it, the referee's going, 1 to me. I'm knocking everybody out, so I'm like, why is he counting to me? I was like, the ref loved me that much that he's making sure I know with the count? 5, and I'm like, did I get knocked down? I look at my corner and they're all stuff's flying everywhere and they're all nervous because my dad never worked my corners. He was too, for a lot of reasons. So they're all out of shape and they're supposed to tell me what to do when I look back at them and they're like, because no one's barely even like cracked me a good one yet in a fight. And I look over at my dad and he goes, just use your legs, just use your legs. So I was like, all right. I don't know what the ref's talking about, but my dad said move my legs. So I danced around a little bit and apparently that was his way to make sure I got my brain together. And within about a minute, I knocked the guy out cold. Probably my best knockout ever. You know, like a good, like, he's fully asleep, throw something on him, wake him up type of knockout. And I won. And so it was at that moment, I'm like, I will go up to my dad and he laughed. I thought he was gonna be mad at me. And he's usually upset at me even when I win.
Really?
If you didn't win the right way, it's a loss. I go up to him and he busts out laughing. He goes, it's a little different when the rabbit's got the gun, huh? And I was like, and he goes, and I was like, Dad, I said, were you concerned when I hit the ground? You know, were you nervous? And he was like, nah. I was like, not nervous at all. And I was like, how so? And he's like, man, he said, I seen you put in the work. He said, I seen you run that 10 miles, pull that car. He said, I always saw that when you chop trees down, you pick the biggest tree. He made me start chopping trees with a hatchet, which is this big, the whole tree down. And he's like, I had seen that. And he's like, I had seen, you know, the fall. He's like, I had seen all that. So he was like, someone knocking you down? And he's like, I know you can beat him. I wasn't concerned. He's like, I just had to make sure you use your tools. And so my point is at that moment, I'm like, all what he taught me wasn't to knock people out, right? Because most people can do that.
Right. But
who can get up and not be phased? Like, I believed in myself so much, I didn't even think I got knocked down. I thought the ref was crazy. And apparently, like, you know, and had I knew I got knocked down and believed that I couldn't do it, that fight would have went really different, you know? And I was like, nah, I'm good. Let's go get him. And that's the completion of that story.
Right.
And after that, I never questioned him on how hard I needed to train, because getting up from a knockdown is not easy.
No, I can imagine. And a big part of what you talk about is this, I guess, fight, you know, against yourself. Do you think then that a big part of your father's preparation is, you know, and I think you talk about it in terms of fighters and boxers, is a big part of what you think your father was teaching you is how to mentally be ready for the fight as opposed to just physically ready, would you say?
Yeah, mental is everything.
Really?
And so what he would say is we watch tape a lot together. He's a boxing fanatic. He loves boxing. Forget the fact that he did it, and I'm the same way. I love boxing. And so we watch fights, and he'd giggle and be like, yeah. And I'd be like, did you fight him? He'd be like, yeah, he couldn't fight, but he could box, you know? And he's like, I always knew like the best boxers that I could beat them because they couldn't fight. He's like, I had to draw them into a fight. And sometimes you got to get hit to draw people into a fight. But what fighting means is you get pulled out of what you practice for, you know?
Right.
And you have to be able to live in that space and be comfortable, you know? And it's all mental. And he's like, I knew when I drew someone into a place that they were uncomfortable, they weren't comfortable being uncomfortable. That makes sense. And he's like, that's where I practiced.
Right.
And that's where I want you to practice, in the uncomfortable zone. And that's where it starts, you know? So like, even like with the training, he'd have me, he'd fill his wheelbarrow up with dirt. I would fill it up. And then I'd push it up a hill and then back it down the hill, push it up, back it down, push it up. And then when I could barely move, he'd hand me hand weights and then we shadow box. He's like, this is the start. This is how we get the practice. Everything else was getting you to the point where you're able to practice performing perfectly under pressure. So that's fighting. And,
Right.
And so, and in hindsight, the way I've been able to articulate it, and we talk about it all day, is flipping a switch, feeling what I think are, for most people, the gateway devices, feeling those things, and then flipping a switch and saying, all right, now that I feel that, I just know the tool to use is ownership, for instance, you know? Like even in business, when you feel the urge to blame someone who works for you, that's the ownership moment. It's not the blame moment. It's not, how do I displace blame on this person and not hurt their feelings, and not, how do I displace blame on this person and not alienate them with their coworkers? How do I displace blame on this person and not take away their motivation to do their job at a high level? Don't displace blame, own it. It's your fault. Now, if we look at it as like my fault, or like, how do I fix this problem? assuming that it's my fault. That's ownership. Same thing in the fight, You could say, my corner didn't do this. The ref is crazy. And it's like, no. I got to go out and do this. And so that's what fighting means. And that's what he imparted on me.
Do you think there's a similarity between being an athlete, professional boxer, to being businessman, entrepreneur in terms of your mindset?
I think the relationship between being an athlete on a team and being an entrepreneur is not as close as being a professional fighter or amateur fighter and an entrepreneur, because as a fighter, you train as a team, but you perform on your own.
Right.
And you're also going to have to step it up sometime, even when say, my team gave me the best advice they can give me, but they don't understand what's going on 6 feet away from them in the center of this ring. They'll just never understand, man. I felt it, And I can hear it, and then I grab him, and I could hear how he's breathing in my ear. They can't feel that, They can't. I have to. And that's what it's like being an entrepreneur. When you've jumped off the cliff, they say, you're piecing your wings together, trying to get the engines going, and you can't let what's down below you that you're about to die change your resolve and your calm and the way how well you think under pressure. And then as an entrepreneur, one day you wake up and you have a business and you survived, and it's 3 years later, and you can't use that same mentality to scale and grow. You have to start working with a team. And I think people from team sports do better at that moment. Right? That's just my opinion, and I think it's really important. But I think that moment where you're jumping down a cliff, you have an innovative business model that doesn't exist. There's no analog to compare it to, the pitfalls and the positives and the right partnerships and the right tech, and you're just doing it. That's most closely related to fight sports, in my opinion.
Really?
You're in there by yourself. And oftentimes, you're better than the person you're competing with, so you just have to make sure your best self shows up that day. Not even waiting on their mistakes. And so really you're competing with you and you by yourself, and in many ways you're competing with yourself. Because everybody says you can't do it.
Yeah.
That's being an entrepreneur, in my opinion. And if it's any easier than that, if you walk in with a great team and capital, proven business model that you can copy, and vendors that already exist for the services you need, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're a business owner.
Right.
And that's huge. I would prefer to be a business owner.
Well, that's right. How do you think you can train yourself? Because I know there's a lot of people, listen to this in the fitness industry, and they're trainers, and in a lot of cases want to go from being a trainer to owning their own business and starting their own business. Do you think there's things that you can do to train yourself to have that sort of mental resilience that obviously you'd had from your father from a young age? Do you think can you learn and train and get better at that, or are you just born with it, and if you're not trained at a young age, it's too late?
I think you can be trained to perform the way you need to as an entrepreneur. You can be trained, but I think when you're being trained, it has to be a time where you don't know that's what you're being prepared for, which is why sports is a great platform. But I think, look, responding to conflict is what creating a business is all about, in my opinion, right? Responding to conflict.
Yeah.
I think great relationships are about responding to conflict.
Yeah.
Are you better after the conflict than you were before, or worse, right? And I think so yes, you can be prepared. Anything that teaches you to respond to conflict without making decisions based on the things that make you want to run.
Yeah.
You're not making decisions based on those. You're flipping the script. For instance, I use fear a lot because everybody understands fear. Or even imitation is a great one, actually, imitation. So there's a big urge as a business owner to imitate others, especially when you're starting off and you're like not sure what to do, and you're like, well, they're successful. And it's funny because sometimes they're copying you and then you're copying them, you don't know. So the urge to imitate, to say, all right, I feel the urge. How do I imitate without people knowing I'm imitating? No, it's like, no, be authentic. Like, I can't do that. That's imitation. I'm trying to innovate. I can't. So when you feel the urge to imitate, you're supposed to say, in my opinion, how do I not do that, but still accomplish my business model, right?
Right.
Or how do I, do what they did, but with my product, my service, my way, right? And how do I improve on what they did, or show how what they did was the wrong way to do it? It's your time to be authentic. When fear, which obviously many people understand, it's like, okay, I'm afraid. All right, we're gonna go out of business. Let me buy some insurance. Let me do this. Let me, decrease payroll. No. You have to make decisions based on the belief that this is gonna work out. So based on the belief that this is gonna work out, I'm gonna increase payroll.
So how do
Still
you
get the
do that though?
insurance,
Because
but-
that's very kind of counter. I've obviously been in business for a long time. We've had many situations where that's like, okay, it's not going well. I'm fearful for myself, my family, for the people who work for me. How do you make that decision of no, we're going to increase, we're going to go? Where I suppose a big part of your mind's like, look, this isn't going well, and you don't know what's going to happen. There's that uncertainty in the future. What do you do? What habits do you do to kind of switch that into no, we're going to fight through and we're going to win?
You commit to it. You commit to it. You commit to things like faith. You commit to things like ownership. You commit to things like authenticity, and just be like, I'm not going to sacrifice these things. I'm just not. Just not. And I think when you commit as an entrepreneur, you give your brain an opportunity to be creative enough to execute plans and actions that stay true to those virtues. But if you don't commit, if you're like, yeah, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that, I don't think the creativity is ever going to be there. And I'll give you a story. A friend of mine, he had a business that was going out of, they couldn't make payroll. And he knew another company. It came to his mind because he had to win. But he's like, I have to make sure that these people stay with me because I need a team. So he knew another company that was hiring and growing quickly, and they needed people that had similar talents to his people. So he went over to him and said, look, man, this is about to all go to you know what, but I'm over leveraged. I'm dumping everything I have. I'm going to make this ship sail. I can't pay my people, but I don't want them to leave. In a month, will you hire them? And he actually had an agreement that within a month he would take them all. Called his friend. It's just great that he had that opportunity. So then he went back and said, guys, I can't pay you, but dig in with me, and if it doesn't work in a month, you have a guaranteed job, so stick with us and let's dig in. And it worked. Just an example, Yeah. And my point is, like, that type of creativity wouldn't have been there if he was just like, nah, this is not going to work, let's just, and that's just an example. And every situation is different, but I do believe that those solutions are there if you commit to them.
Right.
You got to run a sound business. And not let things get ahead of yourself. But I think there's always an answer.
Yeah, and so I guess coming back to your boxing example. So when you go down, I suppose you had a decision to make. Then it's like, well, he's hit me hard, and that's it. I'm not going to come back from this, or I'm going to get up and fight on. And I suppose in business, then is that in your mind then was that the only option to get up? You didn't. Nothing else came through your mind, you had to get up. And is that how you would apply that to your business, where even if everything's against you, in your mind it's like, no, I'm getting up and I'm fighting, and nothing even comes into your mind?
Well, two things. Number one, I think everything I'm about to say, put an asterisk next to it. You got to know when to stop when you're ahead.
Right.
There's a great entrepreneur right now that raised $500 million for his business, had a lot of success, could have walked away with $100 million, and he didn't. And he walked away with zero.
Right.
So that's his fault. Because he tried to take too much and take too much risk, and he wanted to walk away with $1 billion cash instead of $100 million. He could have taken 100 and then stuck around and been like, all right, let's see if I can grow this even more and have another win.
Right.
But he could have walked away with $100 million, and he didn't. That's his fault. Now, but he could have taken less, taken some risk off the table. So don't go crazy. Knowing to take a little risk off the table. And as a fighter, I've seen you watch it all the time. And my dad was saying, he tells me all the time, this guy was about to win the fight, and he didn't have a corner that could tell him when to back off. So you got to know when to back off. Having said that, back off when you're ahead. And know when to sit back and wait a little bit and let everybody make some mistakes, and then you do it. Having said that, you got to know which death you prefer, right?
Which death?
Which death you prefer.
Right, okay.
Got to know your preference. And in boxing, there's the stool, because when you don't want to fight anymore, there's a couple things that can happen. They can throw in the towel for you, the ref can throw in the towel, your corner can, they throw a white towel and it's over. Or you can come back to the stool and sit and say, I don't want to go on anymore. And then, really? Yep. And that's called, he quit on the stool. In the fight, I had a guy do that on the other side one time. That's a death. That's not going anywhere. It's terminal. It's a type of death, and you're never gonna forget that. And we all know it in our sport. Now, and hopefully your corner can get you to go back out there. And it's dangerous. You could die. But is your preference that death, or the real one, doing everything you can and getting cracked and getting back up and getting cracked and getting back up and getting cracked and getting back up. You'd be punching below the belt and grab him, bite him on the shoulder. I don't know, but you got to know which death you prefer. And I think, you know, as an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. It's like, do I put this one or this one? Because guess what? The risk and surety of the death is going to be around the corner is there when you're starting a new business. It's there every day. No matter how successful you are, you might start growing and you can't keep up with the growth, and that's what's going to kill you. Prefer that though.
Yeah.
Or go get a job.
Yeah.
It's way better. I'll probably go get a job one day, man. I can't keep doing this forever.
Yeah.
But you understand?
Yeah.
Choose your death.
Yeah, so
Know what you prefer and let that guide your actions. And if you prefer that death, then make choices for that. That's fine. But don't be here in the middle.
no.
Then you're not going to be successful one way or the other. So.
And I like the point you've made about that commit, you know, commit to a decision, because I guess, you know, you have got a choice to either say, well, I'm going to accept that it might not work, or I made a decision that I'm going to get up and continue to fight until I can't fight anymore. And I suppose that's just, nobody really knows what's going to happen in the future, but they're mental decisions that I guess have a big impact on the outcome. And I suppose your decision as a metaphor was, you know, well, whatever happens, you're going to get up and, you know, you're either going to get knocked down or you're going to win, as opposed to,
you're going to get killed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, or just staying on the ground. And I think that's, you know, very relevant. Now, a lot of people in business, and I think these are things that you've got that internal fight that you have in your mind all the time.
And remember, you have a corner. The corner can advise you. They can throw in the towel for you. They can get in there and help you. The corners can pull tricks for you. In boxing, they'll tell you, you know, they'll be like, spit your mouthpiece out. You spit it out. Then the referee has to pick up the mouthpiece, dust it off, bring it back. They put a little water on it. Then you come back, and then they take their time putting it, and now you got your mind back, you know?
Right.
And then you fall on the ground, boom, knocks you down again. And you go like this with your gloves that put salt and dirt on it, and the referee must take that off. Those are seconds to get you back into the fight. So if you want to die out there in the fight, you'll think of those things, right? You'll think of those things. There's a great fight by Diego Corrales, and he kept getting dropped, pow, pow, pow. And then finally you saw him, he was playing all the tricks in his corner. They were pulling every trick in the book just to get him a breather. And the ref screaming, he's like, all right, get him back. And he went out there and won the fight. But had he prepared for himself to sit on the stool and die that way, they wouldn't have thought about that stuff, you know? And then another thing in boxing, I hate to say cheating, but like you can, if you hit someone below the belt and they're discouraged because they're like, this dude keeps getting up, right? They are allowed to take a 5-minute break. So you crack them, boom. And he's like, they hold themselves and they go to the break. I'm not saying you do. I've never done this, but they go to the corner and then they take the 5-minute break and then you're recovering.
Right.
And then you go back out and win the fight. It's a poor example, but my point is like, you'll think of ways to win when that's your preference.
Yeah. When it's life and death, more or less.
I want to die in the ring. Yeah. You'll think of ways to win.
You'll keep it going.
Ali was like that.
Really? Interesting. So let's move on to business then. So you've had a very, you know, interesting boxing career. You managed your father in his business. What made you decide to want to go out on your own? Because I understand it wasn't easy, and you probably didn't need to go through that. And you know that was also a tough fight as well. Tell us about that story, how you did it, why you did it.
Going from boxing to being a business owner?
To being a business owner.
Yeah. So so my dad was training me. He agreed to train me. We started fighting. One of the requisites, I always forget this, of him training me was not just running in the boots, not just pulling the trailer, not just agreeing for him to try to kill me once a week. It was, he had closed the boxing component of our gym, our youth center, because of unsupervised sparring. And he said, if I'm going to train you, you have to start the boxing program back up from scratch. So I don't know what I'm doing. I've been around a boxing gym all my life, right? But fully disclosed, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, don't worry about it. They're only going to know what you teach them, and they don't know any better. It's all going to be beginners, and just teach them what I taught you that day. That's it. That was my lesson plan. And this went on for 4 years. And I had a team of about 15 to 20, probably almost 20 fighters that I trained. Only about 7 or 8 of them will be competing at one time, so more like 30 fighters. And I had a USA Boxing amateur team. And most of them couldn't pay their dues. or their parents refused to. So I just said, come on anyway. They couldn't afford the mouthpiece. I paid for it. So I was losing money doing this, which is fine. And and when I'd have to go off to go off for a fight, I'd have to pay someone else to come in and train, keep them showing up at the gym until I got back, you know? So it was not a business, but I loved it. And you would have to, you know, when I'm in training, like I look for any excuse for it to be a 10-round session over a 17-round session, because it's hard.
Really?
If you're doing it right. But then the 2.5 hours before my training and the 3 hours after, which is when I train my fighters, you would have to beg me to leave the gym. Literally beg me, like, hey, we got to close up, man. You know, the lady who ran the gym. So
you really enjoyed that, training other people and coaching them. So I guess similar to what your father was doing to you in some ways.
It was the first time I was fully aligned with the passion. I love boxing, and that was a passion, but this was here.
Right.
And I used to tell a friend of mine at the time, I wish I could just do this, you know? And if I could, I'd leave boxing in a second. So I was watching an interview by Dave Chappelle. I hate to tell you this, but it's the truth, so because it's long. And he was talking to this guy that always interviews at Stars. It's like he always has a black background and a beard. You would recognize him. So anyway, he's interviewing Dave Chappelle. And Dave is telling him about how he got into comedy. And he said, I wanted to be a star. All my family and relatives, most of them were educated people, been 2 or 3 degrees. I think some of them may have been doctors or had a doctorate. And his dad was like, no, I want you to go into academia, and maybe butchering this story. But he said, Dad, no, I want to go into comedy. And he's like, the odds of you being successful in comedy, you know, are very little, extremely little. And his dad had a point, but he said, Dad, I think his dad was a teacher. He said, Dad, if I can make a teacher's salary doing comedy, wouldn't that be successful? And his dad was like, all right, you got a point. So these are all things that are going through my mind. So I come up to Boston, a little burnt out with boxing, because I'm like, why am I like, I remember like looking at my paycheck and negotiating a fight contract, and I was like thinking about how this is gonna support my bills, and I was like, am I really fighting for money? Because that's not really passion aligned, you know? And a friend of mine took me to a boxing gym in Boston on the BU campus called The Ring, and we worked out, and I asked him, I was like, how much is it to be here? I was gonna be there for a week or two. He's like, it's $140 a month, but don't worry about it, you know? And so, and then we were driving, he was like, yo. And AJ is my business partner. This is like the 7th business idea I'd heard from him in the past like 3 years. He's like that, always starting a business. And he's like, you should open a boxing gym in Boston. And I looked at him, I gave him this look that normally means I'm upset, but I was actually like, I love boxing, open a boxing gym, Boston. And I was just really excited when he said it. He actually thought I was gonna be mad at him for some reason. He's like, don't give me that look. And I was like, no, this is a good look. And so I stayed up here for a little longer, and I put on my boots to do my road work because I was still an active fighter. And I had a list from Google, and on the list was every gym in the city or even on the outskirts that I could find. And so put my boots on and just ran, took a tour of every gym you can think of in the city. Like make a list, and I bet I've been to them. And then I made it all the way into South Boston, right? And I was visiting a gym, and I walked in, and it was a boxing gym. And I was like, hey, can I take a tour? And they were like, sure, go. And all the other gyms I'd been to were like, oh, come into our office, and we walk you through a plan. What are your goals? They were like, yeah, go. And I'm like, all right. So I go take a tour, and I come back, and I was like, what are your rates? They're like, here. I'm like, wow, they must be making some money in here. So I was like, looked at the rates. It was $100 for a contract, $130 if you pay month to month. And then I said, how many, is it busy in here? Like, how many members do you guys have? 1,000. Like, not giving me any attention at all. So I walked out of there, and this was in the hood. And my gym in Texas, where I train my fighters, was in the hood, and I was uncomfortable in that hood. Like, this was a hood, I thought, at least. And so I go back, and I told my business partner, who's now my business partner, AJ, he was in real estate at the time. I said, there's this little area, and it's a mile from the sweaty boxing gym who showed me no love, and it's directly a mile from Equinox. The sweaty boxing gym charges $130, and Equinox charges $156.99. And there's no gyms here. And they say that there's gonna be a lot of construction here. I said, maybe we should open a gym here. And he was like, yeah, George, you remember last week when I said you should open a gym in the seaport? And I was like, yeah. He said, that's the seaport. And so that was his gut from a real estate standpoint. And then I came back like all hopped up, and he was like, yeah, that's a seaport. That would be a good place. And I was like, oh, all right. So then I wrote a business plan. It's called liveplan.com because I didn't know how. I knew how to write a business plan, but not to that level. Wrote it up, and I ran my numbers. And I was like, how do I break even? Because I remember in managerial accounting, they're like, break even. That's all you have to focus on. Pepperdine. So I did some research, and I was like, maybe I should just franchise. So I called LA Boxing, who's now UFC. They had like 70 units at the time, and they were trying to sell me on franchising in Boston. I didn't tell them my name. And they were like, oh, we would love to go to Boston. Really? I was like, really? Why? Why do you love Boston? Oh my God. You know, Massachusetts has 25% of the population with a membership in the gym membership, #1 in the nation. I said, really? And they're like, yeah, Boston is a little higher than that. I was like, okay. I was like, what do you guys charge? What's the average you guys charge? And our average membership across all our clubs is $70. Some are a little higher, but $70. What's the break even? I was like, all right, cool. So I do my research, and I found Boston was the #1 city in terms of percentage of a population with a gym membership. Next statistic, it was #3 in the nation in terms of average price paid for a gym membership at $91, and San Diego and New York were 2 or 1 above it. And then I was like, that could have been saturation, but I thought it was an opportunity, right? Because of this area that didn't have a gym. So then I was like, okay, break even. So 500 members, I heard that number. So I said, okay, could I break even with 500 members at $70? I could literally just break even, right? Based on how much rent I thought we could pay here. So I was like, okay, what if I'm charging 91, which is the average in Boston? It's profitable. And I said, what if I charge with this sweaty boxing gym charge they showed me no love, yeah. With 6,000 square feet charges, 130, it was really profitable. I said, what if I charge with Equinox charges? We have a business.
Right.
So I had a carry-on suitcase, and I told AJ I'm staying here. And he was like, George, you have a boxing career. Your dad's waiting in Houston to train you. I was like, nah, I'm staying here. And he was like, I want you to go travel for 10 days. Because remember, I'm starting the business, not him, you know? And he's like, this is my friend. I pumped him up. He's about to leave his career to start a gym. Like, he felt responsible. So I traveled for 10 days all around the world. Came back, not all around the United States and South America. Came back, and I checked into, I think, the Elliott Hotel, right? I still had a little money from boxing. And I said, I'm here, man. I'm here. I'm ready to go. And he goes, are you crazy? And I was like, no. He's like, all right, come to the office. So I showed up to the office, had my business plan, and I started refining it. And so everything I just told you was that's why I said I'm not leaving Boston until I open this gym. And I thought it was gonna take 6 months. And I had a carry-on suitcase, and that was it. So I slept on AJ's couch, then until I could find a place. I got a roommate, and I got a air mattress, and I had a box the air mattress came in, and that was all my furniture. And I just went to the office every day, and I would get there the earliest I could take the bus, Silver Line, to the train to get to Back Bay, which is where his office was. And then I would leave right before the last train left, which is midnight. And so it was like I'd go home for about 4.5 hours, and I did that for a year. And I just refined it, and then we started pitching, and that's a whole nother story. But this was all, had all those things not happened, the LA boxing phone call, doing the research, live plan actually existing that I could write a business plan and put in front of people and say, you're not crazy.
Right.
Equinox 156, them at 130 at the time. Had that spread been a little larger, I probably wouldn't have stayed in Boston. Wow. That's it.
And did you think of, because it was obviously not an easy start, and you was pretty much doing it on your own. Did you ever think of, like your dad at the time was obviously doing pretty well with the consumer product. Did you ever think of kind of tapping up Dad for it, or did you just want to do it on your own?
Of course, of course. Well, my dad wasn't speaking to me at the time.
Oh, really?
He literally wasn't speaking to me. I'd text him and he might hit me back. And I went home and it was awkward, you know? So I didn't have any support from my father. Not just financial support, just like support, you know? Because we had invested in a big boxing career, you know, and I just walked out on it. Yeah. So I would have been the same way he was, you know? So yeah, I thought about it. I was like, okay, my dad's not gonna help me, but can I use what I learned from him? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna start the gym, but we're also gonna build a brand, and we're gonna sell home meal delivery, digital fitness, home fitness, and this and that, and blah. I had this whole website, everything, and I had it. And I was sitting down with AJ, and it was just about the time my business partner, he was about to come into the fray, and actually work with me, right? Because he loves boxing and he knows real estate. So, and we both looked at each other and we were like, this is the wrong way to do it. We have to build a brand, being good at one thing. And so we're just going to focus on the gyms, but we're going to preserve the brand and incubate the brand. So when we want to do all those things, we can do them anytime. We can do them 20 years from now, 2 years from now, et cetera. So that was the influence from my father, thinking more about a brand and what you can do with it. But him helping me no. Right. And then it came time to get money, and I'm meeting with all these investors. And I got about 97, 98 no's for sure, maybe more than that.
Really?
But the question they all ask me is your dad in? Your dad sold $4 billion worth of grills. Why are you asking us for money? Every time. So finally I brought it up to him. I was like, just to have you in, and he just didn't give me any money. So I tried, because if for no other reason, just to say my dad was an investor, that would have helped me.
Do you think it was good that in the end you didn't need to get any money from your dad, do you think?
One of the sweetest moments in my life from a father-son perspective is the gym was about to open, and I asked my dad a question for some influence on equipment. He's now talking to me again. He's like, this dude's gonna do it anyway, so let's be friends. And he gave me advice. So that was big. He's actually advising me on my business. Number two, he sent me a long message, and he said, you know what? Now for sure, no one can ever say that anything was handed to you. You did this all by yourself relative to me and him. And he's like, I'm so proud of it. And went on and on and on about something I did fully on my own. In fact, I did it with him trying to stop me from doing it.
Right.
And that was great. And it was really cool for me and him to have that moment.
Yeah.
As a father and son.
It must have been difficult, to have someone that's just been so successful, not just in a professional career as an athlete, but then as a businessman, he's had phenomenal business success. So, how do you follow in those shoes without people like yourself and also your father thinking that it's come as a result of that? It must be, I guess some people think, it must be great to have a father like that, but I can also imagine it must be very difficult to have your own identity.
It's difficult to have your own identity when your father or anyone in your family is a celebrity and people are comparing everything you do to them.
Yeah.
And especially when he was great at 7 things, But remember, so I'll finish the story.
Yeah.
I had my air mattress, and the box of air mattress came in, and then the air mattress busted. And I would air it up and patch it, so if my roommate walked in, he'd see me on the, and then within 2 hours I was on the floor, and I'd sleep on the floor every night. And then I couldn't pay rent because I spent all my money living in Boston, et cetera. I just didn't have any money, and I didn't want to fight anymore because that was a digression. I'm an entrepreneur now. And I went back to my friend's couch. And so when you're concerned about my dad was this and what are people going to think and all that, that's distracting. But when you're just trying to open a business to pay rent, and you've already signed your name to the lease, you don't think about that stuff. I'm telling you don't think about that stuff. And before that couch, I actually got, and I don't know how they let me sign that lease, but before that couch, I was sleeping in the gym. So I'd clean myself up so I didn't look homeless. I'd sell memberships, $450 up front. You had to sign to get a membership to my gym. Sold 500 of those before we opened. But I would sell memberships all day till 10 o'clock at night. Because people would be coming home to their residential building, pop in. I'd be like, hey, I'm here. And they're like, weirdo, but here's a check. And then I'd sleep. I'd close these 2 doors where no one could see through the windows, and I'd sleep on the yoga mat, and then I'd wake back up, go down to the common area restroom, because it was a building that had other tenants, pull myself together, a little deodorant, and sell memberships. You're not worried about your dad when that's going on, So that was a blessing.
Yeah. What do you think was the most difficult part of, starting that business? Because there's a lot of people who are probably trying to raise money. They're signing a lease, they want to get people in the doors, doing everything that you did. And it sounds like, even yourself, you were literally there on the floor selling memberships and doing everything. What would you say was the most difficult thing to do? And what advice would you give to, I guess, younger trainers that wanted to have their own, get their own business like you had?
I'd say the most difficult thing was, I'd say 2 things. Doing that, starting a business and all that, it's very lonely. It is extremely lonely. And getting comfortable and getting your mind strong to be lonely in something that's so hard is difficult. I'd say crying. holding back the tears
Really?
is hard because it feels like a weakness. And then just letting yourself cry and be like, all right, let's get this over with. And not feeling different about yourself, you know? Letting yourself cry, because it's probably going to take that at some point. You go hide in the closet and do it, you know? And then what my advice to entrepreneurs is, I'd say two things. Number one, when you're starting a business, know what the service and experience or product or whatever it is you're trying to get to the consumer, and believe in it, because it's going to take a lot, right? Just know and believe in it. Like, this is what I want to sell, because if you're doing it to make money, that's a whole nother strategy, and I wouldn't recommend it. You have to pull all types of tricks, and that's more like, but if you want to be an entrepreneur and create something that doesn't exist, make sure you believe in the product, because it's going to take you here, it's going to take you there, and you got to be committed to it, number one. Number two, as it's taking you here and there, don't be so bullheaded to not change your delivery method, Be bullheaded on what you want to bring to the consumer, but maybe I bring it to the consumer in different ways, right? And have the stamina to wake up, and whatever way worked last year may not work next year, and be like, all right, have the stamina to try new things ahead of time, because one day you may not have a choice and you want to be good at it because your competitors may be lazy or too big to move. Have that stamina to keep optimizing and changing the way you deliver your product or service to the industry. You got to have that, or quit.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is, you're supposed to quit.
Really?
You're supposed to.
And what do you mean by that?
You're supposed to quit. And if you think about like the story like of me getting knocked down in the ring, like a guy just physically punched me in the face, my brain bounced on this side of my brain, went to the other skull, went to the other side, bounced, it bruised. You're supposed to quit. And as an entrepreneur, same thing. There's gonna come times where you're supposed to quit, and you're supposed to look at yourself and say, this is why no one else is doing it, right? And then you're supposed to go and push past that.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do. And if you don't find a moment where something's telling you to quit, no one believes in your business model. Investors won't give you the money. You're out of money. You can't make payroll. If you don't find yourself in those situations with the product you believe in, you're not doing anything.
Right.
But you're actually supposed to quit. Yeah, it's the most logical thing to do.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point. Yeah, and so that's part of the game. And at some point, you're going to be, to use your metaphor, you're going to be on the canvas. You're meant to be down. Someone's going to knock you down, and you're meant to quit at that point, really. And I guess the ones that succeed in business are the ones that get up, and there's probably very few people that are prepared to do that. But I guess if you want to succeed, you've got to be one of those. Or it's like, look, don't bother getting in the ring. You're not going to be a boxer.
Otherwise, you're not fighting.
Yeah.
And that supposed to quit moment, that could come in year 1, year 3. That can come when you've raised $30 million and now you have a down round and you're not going to make anything if you keep pushing, ever. There's so many different ways it can come, but it's going to come. Don't call yourself an entrepreneur if you don't get to that moment and you say, wink, smile, nod, go in the restroom and cry, and come back out, wipe it, and come out leading your team like you don't care. If you don't want to do that, and you're not prepared, or you're not envisioning yourself in that moment every day, preparing for that, go get a job. It's much better. You can have a house and a 401k.
Yeah. So in relation to the business, everybody fights. How do you take that philosophy to the average person? There's a nice story in your book, which I recommend people look at, about people's, own personal challenges and, illnesses and sicknesses, and whether that's mind or body. Tell me about the philosophy, because it's not just a boxing gym where it's not a typical boutique where you're just giving people a great experience and playing music and that. There's a lot more depth to it. Could you explain what the concept is built on beyond just the workout?
Beyond the workout. Great. A lot of what we talked about today was boxing, and I talk a lot about entrepreneurship because that's what I know, right? I know I have, like, to this day, I've never, like, been to a job interview, and I'm looking forward to it. You know what I mean? But I've never been to one. And so, entrepreneurship, but everything I'm talking about that I learned from boxing that applies to entrepreneurship, I believe, because I apply it, it applies to being a good father, being a good mother, being a good teammate on a team that already exists, right? Being a good, and the list goes on, People have their aspirations. I just talked about entrepreneurship. And I think it all goes back to a willingness to fight, a willingness to wink when your back's against the wall, and being an expert at responding to conflict, being an expert at it. And all your relationships, whether it's a relationship with your business, your employer, your wife, your husband, all your relationships get stronger post-conflict.
Yeah.
That's fighting. And that's my message. That's what I want. I want everybody to have that attitude, feel that empowerment, and feel that willingness to say, yep, I'm in a fight, and I'm not going to make decisions based on vice, is what I call them, right? Fears of vice. So at the gym, right, because it applies to so much more, like being an entrepreneur is sometimes not even necessary because the market already has what we need. There's times when it's not necessary, but all these things in life are there every day. Being a good son, being a good family member, right? All these challenges. If I can take you into the gym and safely with a plank, everybody can do a plank for 10 or 20 seconds, assuming, healthy and such. I can find something, right, to challenge you. You're injured, but we got to move today, we got to find a way to wiggle our toes or whatever. I can find something to challenge you and then get you to the point where you're like, all right, I'm supposed to quit. My body's telling me to quit. My mind's telling me to quit. Can't really breathe that much. And safely push you a little bit past that. And I think that what happens at a physical level is even more stronger at the mental level when you push past that. When I ask you to with words and you actually do it yourself. And I think that can be carried into fighting for what you want in relationships, in business, in family, and so on and so forth, and in health sometime. And I think we can give people that ingredient through fitness. We have to have the right type of trainers, the right atmosphere. There's a lot that goes into it, but that's my goal. And once someone has that, I'm done. They don't need me anymore. They can do it at home. That's our message.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, as you say, that applies. It's what goes on in there really seems to strengthen you for outside of the gym. And I know
it's a safer opportunity than getting punched in the face. It's a safer opportunity than just starting a business when first and realizing, ooh, this is what it takes. Go to the gym first and work on your mental game. Go somewhere and work on. There's safer opportunities than what I did and what other people do that learn to fight the hard way. You can do it hard, but in a safe environment, and I think fitness is an opportunity for that.
Yeah, I know you're big on stories, and you've got some great stories and examples. How do you use stories? Purely focusing on your fitness business. How do you use stories in your marketing? As part of your marketing plan, and what could people probably learn from that?
I don't know, man. I like stories just because I like stories, I love stories. I love good storytellers. So that's number one. I like stories because, they're told in an authentic fashion. People can lie to you with stories too, Some of the best storytellers are liars. But they're told in an authentic platform, right? And so it's just great. It's fun and it's easy. And one of my best friends says, why lie when the truth is so much fun?
Yeah.
The truth though, not a piece of truth and you put this on it and tagged it and said, don't, come over here. All right, now take the picture. That's a piece of truth.
Yeah.
That's reality TV or, that's not real. But I think, so my biggest message is to people, like what we say is, like when we're trying to market to, for instance, everybody's trying to market to millennials, right? Right. That's great. By the way, I think the people who are going to, side note, make your business work are not the millennials, but the people who are following the trends millennials are creating and actually spending money on it, because the millennials don't like to spend money, right? So the guy who's 42, who spends, I have a guy who spent in his 50s that spent $60,000 in our gym in 2 years. I don't even know what he spent it on. Like I didn't even know that was possible, but he's following millennial marketing patterns, right?
Right.
I mean, consumption patterns. So that's what you want to cater to millennials. Okay, my point is when we're advertising to millennials, don't advertise to them. Show a millennial using your product in real life, like time. Don't invite them in and be like, here's it free. Like if they're using your product, show it. And then show people you got it, and it has to be real, right? Because if it's not real, that means number one, if you manufactured it and then a millennial actually comes in, they're not gonna like it.
Yeah.
So that forces you to provide a product that fits your market. It forces you. So then the people using it, you can take a picture and then market to them by just showing people someone who looks just like you that you identify with is right here using the product. And that goes for Generation X and Z and Y. That goes for baby boomers, women, men, affluent, non-affluent, cultural. Just show them doing it. And if they're not already doing it, get out of business. Go do something else, or change your business model. To me, that's the best way to market, and it's the most authentic story. Yeah. Just show people using your product, and don't try to manufacture it.
Yeah. And I know you talk about authenticity quite a bit, and I guess it can be very tempting if you look at Instagram, for an example. Everybody wants to show the best version of themselves, but reading about yourself and listening to some of your philosophies, it's almost like, and even in terms of creating your own content, it's like, look, don't spend ages perfecting your content. Put the stuff out that's real, because people are going to connect with you with that authenticity, as opposed to you pretending that you're something a lot greater than you are, and that's not really the case. Yeah. Tell me your experience on that.
Yeah, I think like a friend of mine, he's in the supplements business. He's doing really well, great business. And that's what I love, stories, right? I was listening to him tell their story, and he was like, yeah, we did a massive marketing budget with models. Because my point is, like, same example, models weren't using this product. He wanted people who want to be like models to use this product, because models will never use this product because they don't eat. But I'm going to show a model using my product, right? So he had that ad campaign. Then he had one with, like, I think super like fit muscle, not quite fitness muscle type head type people, but like functional, like, what do you call them? Super athletes or like Apex, using his product. And then he had one marketing campaign, just curious, of just a regular Joe, because that's the mass market. It's people like me who are trying to lose 30 pounds right now that's going to buy his product, right? That's how you make money. And believe it or not, and I don't know if this would have worked 20 years ago. It's a different consumer these days. They're more discerning. That one was the lowest user acquisition cost. That one performed the best. Not the model, which was fake. Not the people who were already in shape, who didn't need his product. Showing the people, the type of person who needs his product, using his product, worked. And so I could have preached this to you three or 4 years ago, and I didn't have like data. Yeah. But at least his data says that just tell the truth. Yeah. And that, to me, that's the best story that shows that authenticity is the new marketing scheme. Yeah. It's the new trick.
And I think
I think it is. I hope it is.
Yeah, and I think probably now with social media and that, it's a lot easier for people and the internet to find you out. Probably years ago you could hide behind this sort of image, and even the people who run the company, they could get away with things. But I think nowadays things are it's so easy with sort of sites where you can, restaurant sites and gym sites. People can sort of leave reviews, and you can't hide it now, can you?
You can't hide it, and people read reviews with a grain of salt, but right now, nobody reads anymore. But people are reading more than they ever read before. And a friend of mine who's a book publisher told me this, by the way, so talk to him if that's not true. I believe it's true, because I think by the time people stop to actually read your marketing, they're exhausted. They read all those texts, they read all the Instagram, and then they read what goes under the caption. I mean, they've read, and they're tired, Like, they're just tired. So people have read more than they've ever read before without actually picking up a book and choosing to read, or picking up a magazine. So what does that mean? It means a lot of things, but for me it means their sniff test is so good now. It's so good. I think it's better than the guy that would have owned like a massive marketing or advertising agency in the early 90s. I don't know if that's true. But their sniff test is so good, they'll sniff you out. Yeah. So just be real, And I think people actually appreciate real, even when it's not quite aligned with what they want. They see it's real. I think they appreciate that more than something that's perfectly aligned with what they think they want. Just be real, because they can tell, man. Even when they don't know, they can tell. They can tell.
Yeah, and I think that's all about, in any relationship, it's about building trust, and I suppose, being open and exposed. Whether, even if it's not great, at least they know they can trust you, and you're not going to tell them something that's not true. Yes, interesting lesson. So a couple of ones before we finish then. So what's been your biggest fight in life or business, would you say?
My biggest fight in life, I'd say my biggest fight in business has been knowing when to shut up and let great people figure it out. And great people don't figure it out the first time, especially if they don't have your experience. These are my teammates, people I work with, but they figure it out the second and third time. Not great people never figure it out and they like ruin it, you know? But if you've hired great people and partnered with great people, give them a chance. Just shut up, stay out of the way, but be there, follow what's going on, to be there to catch them if they go too far in the wrong direction, and just be there.
Yeah.
But let people figure it out, you know? So that was hard for me, because it's like when you care about your employees or the people you partner with, you don't want to see them make mistakes, you know? Even if it's a mistake that's going to cost you $100, you're like, no, I can. And I think learning how to like be calm, sit back, you know, wait and go do something else, you know, and bring more opportunity to them so that their mistakes are not as big of a deal, I think has been my biggest challenge, and it's something I work on every day. Number two, in life, having great relationships with my friends and family while trying to build a business. This is just, I pray about it every night, actually. I don't even, it's tough, man.
It's tough, yeah.
It's really tough. It's really tough. And like, you know, having something to ground me outside of my work. Like, I haven't been to a church in 6 years, and I don't even know if that's, you know, I'm not suggesting church. I'm just saying like something.
Yeah.
So I think finding a personal connection and maintaining personal connection with the people who aren't in my four walls or in my office every day has been tough.
Yeah.
And I think it's important not to lose that.
Yeah. And particularly in a family business, I've got a family business, and it's as great as it is, because, you know, you're lined up, you've got similar values, and, you know, you'd all work for free, which is another big benefit. But also, you know, it's as families grow, it's also quite difficult, isn't it? You know, and everyone's got their own views.
And in a business, man, it becomes even harder, because we hire people we like, that we dig, even when their skills are not there and their credentials are not there, because we know they'll figure it out if they have an acumen. And then those are like your best friends, and they do what you do. So like, not to let all your time be consumed with like your friends at the office is a challenge, you know?
Yeah.
Because there is more than business, it's family.
Yeah, that's right. What would you say is the key to winning?
The key to winning? I think number one, the key to winning is defining what winning is and feeling good about that. Yeah.
That's a very good point. I like that, defining what winning is, because I guess, not to cut you off there, but, you know, a lot of people, it's like they don't really know what winning is. It's like, well, I want to win, and I want to get somewhere, but I'm not quite yet defined what that is. And they keep going, like you say, you know, knowing when to stop as well.
Knowing when to stop, right? So I think defining winning ahead of time, knowing your price before you get it is important. And just using the boxing analogy, like the guy who actually has great skills, doesn't have his back up against the wall, and punches his opponent below the belt, right, and wins, did he win? But the guy who was like, I'm within an inch of my life right now. I've been on the canvas 3 times. Oh, just so the referee can stop it. I didn't mean to do that to you. And then finds a way to win. And it's like, I just didn't want to get killed.
Yeah.
Then he goes around the corner to the guy and said, I fouled you. I'm sorry, I'll give you a rematch. You know? And I'm happy, so like, my bad, but I was in it, man. Like, that was adrenaline, you know? The guy that does that, like, all those things coming together, I think he may have won. Even if he looks at the guy and says, I lost the fight because I cheated. But he went back, you know? Like, he was just trying to survive, you know? Obviously not doing anything worse than like a foul in a sport. You don't go break laws. But I think fighting so hard to win, even when you're sure of defeat, when like defeat is sure and you still keep fighting to win, I think that's a W. That's always a W.
Yeah.
Especially if you can, you know, follow the rules.
Yeah.
Surety of defeat, and no one is discouraged by the look on your face, that's a win.
Yeah.
And then everything else is just a scoreboard.
What was your favorite fight of your father?
My favorite fight of my father's was, there's 2 fights really. He had 2 careers, total different guy. First career, he was a wrecking machine, and apparently you couldn't even like speak when he was eating.
Really?
Just a tough guy, man. You know what I mean? He was fighting a guy named Ron Lyle, and in his corner was one of his old trainers, in Ron Lyle's corner. And Ron Lyle knocked him down 6 times, just what we've been talking about, I think 5 times. And Ron Lyle was just, for whatever reason, better suited to win the fight that day. He stood up to him, because they were like, George is a bully, so go out there and swing as hard as you can, even if you miss. And so he knew all my dad's tricks, and boom, hit him you got to watch the fight. And so my dad had already lost to a guy named Muhammad Ali. And he had these excuses. If you watch the fight, it was a short count. But he still would have lost if he got knocked. He would have got hurt if he got back up. You know what I mean? They drugged me. The ropes were loose. All these things, you know? And even the story of rope-a-dope, you've heard of that.
Yeah.
It started because he called, I can't remember the guy's name. She would know him. And he said, they doped me. He's like, I'm trying to do this, an investigation. The guy laughed. He said, yeah, George, rope-a-dope. Rope-a-dope. Yeah, because he was like, we're not doing that. And so now he's like, okay, the ropes are tight. I'm in Caesar's Palace in America, not in Africa. This guy is not even a champion. He's a top contender. And I'm in shape. I fired all my corner. All the people I thought tricked me and, you know, poisoned me and all that, they're all gone. What's my excuse now? He's on the canvas, you know? So he gets up, and we've talked about this fight a lot, and he was like, yeah, I didn't really think I was going to get through that one. And he just kept going and going and going, and then he said, he made me watch the last little piece, and he said, look it. And Ron Lau was cracking him, boom! And then he was going scratch, 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 barely hitting him. There's no power in his punches. And Lau was landing the harder punches, but he kept going like, I'm here, I'm here. And he said, I can see it. He just said, this man's crazy. You know? And he's like, I know in my heart. He's like, I didn't fully knock him out. He said, that's enough. Because he's willing to die, and I'm trying to get home back to my family. And so that was my favorite fight, because in his arts, he's like, I wasn't winning that fight. The guy just quit. And this is the guy out of prison. Like, this is a tough man. Number two, and you shouldn't have to be in that position, but if you are, that's what you better have, right? He fought a guy named Michael Moore. And this is about discipline and sucking it up. So he had this powerful jab. Hard, like a pole. You know, and the hardest one in the sport, they say. And it was almost often harder than someone's right hand. But the problem with a hard jab is, if you hit someone with a hard jab, and the head goes back, and you throw the right hand, you miss.
Right.
And that's a problem for him, right? And so he was so afraid that number one, to not throw a hard jab, he said, made him want to cry, because it was totally abandoning what he believed in, power, boom, boom. And so he had never done this before. He started practicing hard jab, pow, pow, and then tap, no power, open palm, so that the guy's head was still there, hard right hand. And he didn't want his corner to know, right? Because he's like, he doesn't trust anyone, they may tell. And his sparring partners will definitely tell, because they just care about money.
Yeah.
So he would go to the gym every day. I videotaped this. At this point, I was old enough. And he'd just beat around the bush, work on his timing, his defense. And he's like, I have to make this guy come to me because I can't chase him. He's younger. He's like 46 at the time, my dad. So I have to, instead of running, I have to move in a circle. So retreat, but retreat in a circle so he's still close. And he's like, if I knock him down early, he's really going to put his guard up and outbox me, and I'll never be able to chase him because my knees are bad. So he's like, how do I not get hurt too much, keep him coming and chasing me, right? And how do I knock him out with my right hand without messing it up with a jab? So at night, he would sit, and he'd come get me about 1 o'clock in the morning after his first nap, and he'd say, come in the gym. And I'd count his rounds with a sheet of little pieces of paper and quarters. And I heard all night, boom, 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 pop, pop, boom, 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 pop, pop, boom, 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 stop, pop. Round one, round two, and you do it for 12, sometimes 15 rounds. And then go in the gym and do something completely different and come back. Come on. You count it. Boom. For like 4 months.
Wow.
Hiding it in the attic in our house. It ruined the structure of all that. And so then he goes into the fight. Sure enough, the guys in the negotiation of that fight was also very funny, because he tricked the guy into getting him to have the glove he wanted. And sure enough, the guy's cracking him, boom, boom, hitting him, and he's tap, tap, but not hard. Just touch, just making sure he could find his chin. Boom, boom, slap, pow, boom. 6 rounds later, boom, boom, bam, just making sure he could find it. Oh, don't hurt me. 7 rounds. And then finally, he goes to the corner, and Angelo Dundee, who is Muhammad Ali's trainer, right? And by the way, he went and found the guy who mentored the only guy to ever seriously beat him and had him in his corner. That was funny. And he goes to Angelo, and Angelo goes, son, you might be behind on the scorecards. And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, I gotta knock this guy out, That's how it gets when you're like so comfortable with fighting. And then he goes back and he tells Angelo off, you shouldn't talk to me like that, because he's amped up, Angelo's like, all right, son. So having the right corner. And then he goes, okay, this is the round I need to get him. So he goes back out, and the guy's done. And then he's like, okay, well now he's gonna be hiding from that. Let's put a left hook in there to get his head back moving in that direction. So he starts cracking hooks. And Ross Greenberg, who was after that became the executive of HBO Sports, was working in the truck, and he said they had to pull their things away, the micro, the headphones, because they hadn't set the levels for that type of crack, And he's like, we were hearing like, what's going on? And then finally Michael Moore kept coming, and Teddy Atlas, who was Mike Tyson's trainer before, saying, don't follow him, stop. And he was like, there he is, boom, boom, just for that fight. Didn't show it the whole training camp. Took absorbing all the people booing and knew the commentators were going to say what they say. Knew the corner didn't even know his strategy. And thank God Angelo was like, I don't know what you're doing, but if you're going to do something, now's the time. And then that type of strategy, going against what's natural for you, what makes you want to cry when you have to change it, and hiding your strategy, not boasting about it, all that to win. Betting, losing every round.
That's amazing.
Because you have a strategy to win, and I think that type of discipline and putting your ego aside and that type of presence under pressure, I think it's really cool.
Yeah. You can now understand why he's been successful as what he is. That's an incredible mindset that most people would never take things to that level, I guess. That's just incredible.
And to wait years before you reveal it.
Yeah.
Didn't even tell the press after. Oh yeah. Wow, what did you? Yeah, I fixed it. Making jokes. 6 years later, I was a grown man before he explained that to me, and he's like, "You remember that?" I was like, "Yep, remember it all."
Yeah.
That's deep.
So final question then. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you or other people have said is impossible, and then gone on to make it possible. We have covered a lot of examples here of that, but what would be a recent example of escaping your own personal limits, whether that be family, business, whatever?
Escaping my own personal limits. The first, it was levels, right? Because it's not easy to just jump to this one for most people. But you
probably do it a lot more than most people on a daily basis, I guess. But
the first escape from my limits was having a hard conversation when I didn't have to, when I could still do whatever I wanted to the person or the organization I'm working with, and still looking them in the face and saying, let's have a hard conversation, a frank conversation, and neither one of us are going to like this, because I knew like I had to do that for me to feel good about what I did afterwards, and also to make sure I can come back and have the relationship one day, even though they hated the interaction at that moment, right? So that was piece one, being able to do that. The next level of that was apologizing and being sincere in my apology, and knowing that didn't make me less of a man, less of an entrepreneur, less of a leader. Just sincerely saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong, it's a mistake. Probably can't fix it, but I want to. Tell me how. And I'm hoping that I'll never do that again, right? Because sometimes people don't know how they respond under pressure. And the last was, and I'm just getting used to this one now, it's like I have to be reminded, is to forgive. I think people say, forgive but don't forget. And I think if you forgive and don't forget, or act and carry on as though you've forgotten, because it's hard to really forget, but don't change the way you deal with it. If you forgive them and keep them in your ecosystem, assuming they're not a murderer or something, you got to just move on. If you want to have positive interactions with that person on a day-to-day basis, and let them go deal with their demons. I've had a hard time with that, just forgiving people. And it takes such a load off you.
Yeah.
You find out it was holding you back from your work. It was holding you back from your other relationships, because you just didn't look at that person and say, it's wiped.
Yeah.
And it's for you. Not just for them. Hopefully they'll take that and add it to their life, but for you, because you can't move. You've now limited how much you can grow in all aspects of your life every time you don't forgive somebody.
Yeah.
That's my belief. And then you add on this, my mom, my sister, my business partner, my classmate, my this, and you haven't forgiven all those people, your relationship ability, bandwidth.
You're carrying that
your bandwidth
with you all the time, I guess.
for healthy relationships
Yeah.
is this. You forgive those people, you can engage with anybody. And that's my belief, and that's my latest breakthrough. full, unadulterated, excessive forgiveness.
Yeah, that's great. Another great lesson, and I think those are things that we do. You know, we all have those situations, and they just, you know, not even just for the person who's probably done something you don't think is right. Like, as you say, it's for yourself, because you're probably carrying that more than what they are in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And it's holding you back from, I guess, even trusting things and people to be able to sort of, you know.
It changes your interactions. And then you have a junior employee come up to you, for instance. I try to relate it to things, an intern, and they say something to you, and you got this wall up, this wall up, this wall up. You got this bunker, right? And they say something, and you can't even hear what they're saying. And because those walls, you think they just apply to that person, they fully apply to that person, right? And when you see them, they're like, oh, my walls, you know? Yeah. But those walls are still kind of affecting how you hear and show up to situations with other people, how you show up and how you hear their information. And when they're down, you can actually hear what the person says.
Yeah.
And so it follows you around. And obviously criminal things and, you know, there's, you know, things that are heinous, and you have to protect your family and your coworkers. But outside of like, you know, we're criminals, as long as it's not like criminal stuff, you should still be able to have lunch.
Yeah.
But outside of like that stuff, you should be able to forgive and let's move on and do everything we were doing before.
Yeah.
And that's strength, and I think you'll change the people that you needed to forgive when they see that.
Yeah.
And you won't have to forgive them anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So if people are interested in the business, Everybody Fights, what are you franchising? Are you looking for investors? Tell us a bit about, you know, are you looking for people to get involved at all?
Yeah, I think, look, we want as many people in the world from a mission standpoint, I guess, from Everybody Fights. Because if it was about business, we'd be in tech, right? But as many people in the world to have the experience of a 6-week training camp as possible. You know, a couple classes, that's awesome. I think we can do something for you there. Experiencing our people and our staff, I think we can do something. But if I can take you through 6 weeks of what it feels like to train for a fight, you don't need to fight. I think that is an experience that's going to affect how you apply yourself to life that no one can ever take from you. Now, how we deliver that, I'm open to it. If someone who knows how to operate a gym has proven they can operate a gym and will make sure the business stays open for 3 years, and I feel confident, I'll franchise to them. Let them make all the money. Keep it. I don't care. Maybe I want to buy it back one day. And then because, you know, it costs about $1 million to open every one of our gyms, it's a lot of money for me, for any small business, right? So there's not enough money in the world, at least for me, to open 100 gyms, and there's not enough time, and, you know? So being able to partner with proven operators to franchise, I'm good with it, but we're going to be super strict on how you execute. It's like almost like we're running the business, but you're financing it. So we're open to franchising for our flagships. And like I said, if I had an unlimited bank account, then I wouldn't franchise. I would just open them myself. I want about 100 locations for Everybody Fights flagships.
Is that in America or
globally?
Globally, right, okay.
I probably won't go that far, but Europe, Canada, parts of South America, etc. And so that's number one. And then number two, I'd like to have 100 plus boxing gyms in gyms that are already operating. Right. Just 2,000 square feet. If they already do yoga, Pilates, running, core, and all the other stuff we do, circuit training, they already have nice locker rooms, well, we'll just do the boxing component.
And you've got one like that in Midtown Athletic in Chicago? Is that a similar concept?
Yeah, in Midtown.
Right.
So we'll do 6 more of those this year. I'm trying to do 100. And that's just a goal. Like, I don't know if that's the right goal. 200 locations, 6,000 to 8,000 users per location. And then at which point we have 1.2, 1.5 million people who are using Everybody Fights. Then maybe we'll figure out how we can turn that into like revenue, you know, beyond just the company-owned facilities. So that's that. And then lastly, but if it's not in one of my gyms, right, that's a growth limiter, right? I'm okay saying like, yo, you want to have your own brand? Can I help you engage people better? Here's my app.
Right.
Use it for free. Just say Everybody Fights helped you. That's like, I got to figure out how to do that, you know, without my investors being upset with me. Yeah. But I just want people to experience it, and I'd love for them to know that we had some play in it. Could it be the glove? Could it be the content? Could it be the fact that they heard their trainer went to my gym for 2 months, and that's why they trust them? I don't know, but I want to play a role globally in people having the boxing fitness experience. So I'm open to anything. Obviously, we're looking at tech and how we can leverage it.
Yeah.
A lot of things. We're looking at home fitness, but I don't know that that's the way to do it. But we'll keep innovating as much as we can without letting the lights go off.
Yeah. Yes. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, whether they've got an interest in doing a gym within a gym concept, or whether they're interested in franchising in whatever country around the world, where can people, what's the channel? Do they contact you? Have you got a person that looks after that? What's the best way to get in touch?
Look, if you want to get in contact with me, there's no one in my organization that won't make it happen at some point. So just Everybody Fights Instagram, Facebook, whatever. My email is George@everybodyfights. I don't check it. It's just too much, But I'm on Instagram sometime, but reach out. If you reach out 2 or 3 times in any of those channels, you will track me down now and in the future. But yeah, everything is Everybody Fights. I check my own Instagram. I respond to my own Instagram. Sometimes I don't use it for a month because I'm with my family. But yeah, we're available, man. And we'd love to hear ideas that people have on how we can expand, because we don't think we're going to figure it out ourselves. But we think listening to people, we might crack the code.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's a wonderful story, and I'm sure an inspiration for many people, as is the business. And so I appreciate your time and wish you a lot of success in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thanks.
That was fun.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.